Okay, welcome back. We did the intro video, which I'm going to just briefly go over that one more time to make sure we're still on the right track. 3 theories: virtue, utilitarianism, formalism. Virtue, be a good person, do things the right way for the right reason. Formalism, how you get there, what you do every day. Never lie, never steal. Just do the right thing all the time. The outcome may not be perfect, but you still are an ethical, we'll say, person and in compliance with formalism, ethical theory. Utilitarianism, get the right outcome. If the outcome is good, it really doesn't matter how you got there, which I know that can be kind of questionable for sure. So all theories can conflict with each other. It's up to us to look at the situation and decide the right way to do it. So this is your chapter 1 lecture. So here we go. And I kind of go through the slides as we go. So if you want to go through those, I'm not going to read them for you. I'm just going to kind of go through the general ideologies for each chapter. Okay, so studying ethics. If we don't study ethics, how can we understand them and apply them? I will tell you that the state of Louisiana offers ethics training. It's very little based on morality. It's really based on, and most ethics training suffers from this fault. It says, it's like the law. It says this is what you're allowed to get away with before you're considered unethical. And I don't think that's really ethics training. It just says, this is what I can do. For instance, a kind of a good example of that is, you as students are allowed to buy me a meal, which is really awesome. No students, almost never do students actually buy me a meal. I usually buy them for them if I get the opportunity. With that said, if you wanted to buy me a meal, you actually could. The rules are, I must eat it with you or in front of you, which is kind of weird. Also, the rule is you can only spend a certain amount of money, and the amount changes. It like keeps going up every few years. Anyway, we're just going to round it to $60 per meal. So that's a pretty nice steak dinner. That's a hint if anybody wants to buy me a steak dinner. If they limit it at $60, that means you can spend $59 or $60.00 on that meal. Okay, but you spend $60.01. You and me, or me for accepting it, just became unethical. And I don't think a 1 penny is a separation between ethical and unethical. Because let's say a student was struggling in a course and about to get an F from me, and we decided, hey, let's meet at Mazin's or Vic and Anthony Steakhouse to discuss your grade. And then you pay for my meal and it's $59.99, okay? And I eat my meal happily, and then I go and I'm looking at the grade book and thinking, that person just bought me a $59.99 meal. If any of us think that situation would not pop into the mind of the person, me, who accepted that, which I would never do, by the way, nobody's allowed to buy me a meal. If I was to accept that meal, I know, and I think everybody else knows, that when it comes time to decide to make a decision on your future, that's going to be in the back of our mind. It's just like if you pull over, police a lot of times get discounts from businesses. So gratuities, we call it, half off for their meal. You stop that same business owner, we'll say the owner, one in Lake Charles that was real popular for a long time was Logan's Roadhouse. A lot of state police and sheriff's office and everybody would go eat there because they gave half off. And cops like to save money just like everybody else. But there was a rule that if you stopped an employee or manager, or especially the owner of that business, they were to be let go. If they didn't, if they were speeding or even DWI, it was like, hey, they really help us out, so let's not issue a citation, not make an arrest. That was the unwritten rule. So that meal that's accepted is actually, at least at some level, unethical. So I think most ethics training suffers from the fault of, we just tell you what you can get away with, just like the law. Just like the law. If you don't violate the law, you get in no trouble. So, and a law is supposed to be hard-lined. The law is if you go over 55 miles an hour, if you go 56, you are actually speeding and breaking the law. There's a hard line in the sand. So, does that make 56 unethical? Probably not. Does it make 54 unethical? Probably not, depending on the weather and stuff like that. So anyway, we need to study it to understand the complexity of it. And so it goes far outside of just what you can get away with, which I think a lot of ethics training currently suffers. We need that moralistic perspective. So I'm going to move on to a slide or two down. Ethical relativism. So each one of us has a different background. Each one of us has had different opportunities, different interactions with the police. I can tell you I grew up very poor, and my dealings with the police were usually very negative. They came in and they arrested somebody, a lot of times a parent, or were looking for somebody, and there was really no respect or care showed to me and my family, probably deservingly, especially as a child, from law enforcement officers. So I grew up not really understanding how law enforcement officers had so much power and how they tended to use that power, not always for good. Now, there were some good ones out there, obviously, but I usually, didn't have the opportunity to deal with those. So I decided a long time ago that I wanted that power because I was powerless, and I wanted to use that for good. So I started a career in public service in 1996, and I'm still serving the public today. But upbringing, environment, race, gender, all of the above can contribute to what people deem as ethical. So even some religions, they have much higher standards than the law allows and so forth. So we have to look at it from the perspective of the person who is involved in it. For instance, I would stop, sometimes I would stop I stopped a young black, this is not a hypothetical. I stopped a young black male, and he was very angry from the time he got out of the car. He was only 16 years old. He had apparently it was obviously been mistreated by the police for a long time. He was very disrespectful, profane in front of his mother. He lied repeatedly. And I found this behavior, disgusting and unprofessional and discourteous. And I thought, I was taught, you submit to the authority of law enforcement. You be respectful because they hold a position of authority and a position of power and a position of respect. Anyway, this person had absolutely no respect for any authority, me as a law enforcement officer, his grandmother, I think it was his grandmother that he was with, and so forth. But I had to step back and say, what put this person in this position? Did this person get subjected to maybe the same negativity or even worse negativity than I had experienced as a younger person? And that was probably true. So instead of taking it personally, I just have to step back and say, it's okay that this person does it. And my job at this point is to try to quell that stigmatization that he had towards law enforcement officers and make things a little better, as in not live up to the standard that apparently he had seen. For instance, I stopped another young black male. I was in New Orleans, and after Hurricane Katrina, I was down there for, it's called New Orleans Task Force, NOTF, and we assisted NOPD and just regular law enforcement because they were short-staffed and all the chaos going on. And I ended up stopping somebody, young black male, for, he had no license plate, just several traffic violations, nothing major. We always called him out of the car. We got him out of the car, and I said, "Hello, sir, I'm Trooper Thompson with the state police. The reason I stopped you," and I laid it out and asked to see his driver's license. He complied. He had enough stuff wrong with his vehicle to tow it. But given it was probably 6 months after the hurricane, people were still struggling. That's the last thing that I wanted to do, was tie myself up, because I needed to be able to respond to something else, tie up a wrecker, and then take this guy's car away. It wasn't going to help any situation. So I said, "Hey, just fix your stuff," and that's it. And he actually looked at me like I was crazy, and I handed him his license back. And he walked back to his car confused. And I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He just basically said he had never been spoken to by a law enforcement officer the way that I was speaking to him at the time, which was just simple, with a basic level of humanity and professionalism. He gave me no reason otherwise, anyway, I was kind of surprised and taken back by that, and it started to help me understand that, some people who don't just get out and say, "Yes, sir, I'm very sorry for whatever I did for you to stop me," or completely submit to the authority, is not always consistent with ethical relativism, as in some groups in society don't feel the same way about what's right and what's wrong, like whether it's okay to steal, whether it's okay not to steal, whether it's okay to panhandle, laws that are made, because the laws are not made by the people who they are enforced upon, otherwise they wouldn't be there. Laws are made by people who want them enforced upon somebody else other than themselves, and that's all of us. We're all hedonists. So that's just a brief talk on ethical relativism. There is no such thing as absolute ethics, because you never know the situation that can pop up that will, guide. Like, for instance, it's never okay to steal. Okay, well, what if you are a slave and the law says you can't steal? What if you are a slave and your child that was just born, that you obviously are going to love because it's your child, is now going to be sold off to somebody else? And taking that child and running away is not only considered against the law for running away because you are the property of another human being, but also because you're stealing a baby, and that baby is not yours according to the law. So it's never absolute, we'll say. But some people would say that, that some ethics is absolute, but that's absolutely not the case. Ethical pluralism, I think I've covered that already. There's different situations, different cultures, and so forth that all ethics applies to. I'm not going to go over too much with, I've already discussed a little bit of ethics relating to religion, but let's talk about ethics and the law. The law is basically our lowest form of ethics, or I shouldn't even say lowest form, because some of the laws, I'm sorry, are stupid. It can be a punishable by up to 6 months in jail to walk a dog at a national park with a 7-foot leash, because a 7-foot leash is too long. It's only allowed to be 6 foot. So if it's 7 foot, 6 months in jail. And I'm sorry, but that's just a silly law. But the law is established. It's written down. It tells you what is illegal, what is not allowed. Now, a lot of people ask the question, what is legal? Is this legal? And the real question should be, is there a law against it? And if there isn't, everything is legal. You can do anything you want in this entire world unless the legislature, the politicians, they passed a law that says you cannot, and they must describe what you cannot do. Like, is it illegal to spit on the sidewalk? I don't think so. I've never seen it written down in the law anywhere. So the ethics in the law is, like I said, kind of our baseline with it, but ethics and the law don't always combine. They're not always in the. There's often in conflict with each other, and we can all come up with examples. It was legal at one point to own slaves. It was a more contemporary idea of a conflict between ethics and the law. You have a lot of people in this country who don't believe in marriage outside the relationship of one man and one woman. And in fact, Louisiana does have a law on the books that's still on the books today that defines marriages between one man and one woman. But the U.S. Supreme Court has decided that is not an enforceable law. Therefore, everybody, gay marriage is legal throughout the country. So some people consider the banning of gay marriage a violation of morality, whereas some people, and so therefore the law would be unethical. And again, there's been a lot of unethical laws throughout history, especially as it pertains to slavery, segregation, and now we even have some states are outlawing abortion, and whether that's immoral or not, that's highly debated. So I'm not going to tell you even my side of it. I'm just going to say it's debatable. And it used to be every state was not, or not every states were not allowed to outlaw abortion, but now they are in the recent overturning of Roe versus Wade. So the moral of that point is can be a conflict between morality and the law. The law, and I'm going to quote, I think it's Brad Pitt in the movie 12 Years a Slave, where Brad Pitt was speaking to a slave owner, and the slave owner said, the law is on my side. I own, this is my property, referring to his slaves. And Brad Pitt, I think his quote was, well, the law is wrong. And so that's an example, a great example of when the law conflicts with ethical standards. Quick just comment on an ethical dilemma. An ethical dilemma is not, it's where the theories conflict, where there's two right choices, we'll say. Like you find somebody, I'm just going to make something up off the top of my head. Like the example I gave in the introduction, you have somebody who kidnapped a child, and that child's going to die if you don't find the child. And then so you have to choose, do I torture this person to get the location of the child, or do I let the child die? And so that's your moral dilemma. That's an ethical dilemma. And so some people would say, no, you really, if you make a choice one direction, you're in violation of formalism or utilitarianism, and vice versa. So that is an ethical dilemma when there's more than one right choice. If there's a tip jar or a donation jar at a convenience store that says, please put money in here for my kid with cancer, and somebody walks in and steals it. Okay, stealing it or not stealing it, it's not an ethical dilemma. That's easy, an easy choice. Don't steal from other people, especially from a child who's trying to getting cancer treatment. So anyway, just understand the difference between an ethical dilemma and what's just simply a choice of, a simple choice of right and wrong. Specific issues in criminal justice. As far as ethics in the law, we've been fighting a war on drugs for approximately a half a century. Written a lot of laws over the years that have been intended to, we'll say, at their face, or according to the law and according to political speeches, to stamp out the drug problem in the USA. Now, I give this speech in person, or when I give this speech all the time, but when we have a problem, I guess my question is, if you had a problem with your plumbing, you called a plumber and he showed up and he said, hey, I fixed your plumbing, or I put something in place to fix your plumbing, and that'll be $10,000, and you pay out $10,000. And a week later, you have the same problem, and you call the same plumber back, and he comes back and says, let me fix it the same way, and give me another $10,000. And then you comply, and then you still have the same problem after the plumber left. And he comes back a third time, and I don't think there's a person in this room or virtual environment that would ever say, I'm going to give him another $10,000 to do the same thing. And that's the insanity of the war on drugs. We've been fighting the war on drugs the same way, essentially, for 50 years. We've been filling prisons and so forth, and it hasn't worked. The goal was to reduce drugs availability, increase the price of drugs to make it where people can't afford them or don't want to buy them as much, and get people off drugs. But availability and the price of drugs, it's more available and less expensive. So our war on drugs has essentially failed, but we keep putting the same money into it. I'd say in the past 5 years, we're starting to get smart. Politicians are starting to listen to the criminologists who say this isn't working, and that's why you're seeing a widespread implementation of legal medical marijuana, because fighting the marijuana war, it isn't working. People are still doing it, so they're just going to collect tax revenue on it, medical and recreational. If you're not aware of it, 20 years or so ago, Portugal implemented a policy of no more war on drugs. If they catch somebody with drugs, it's a civil penalty, no prison time. So they immediately reduced their prison population by simply doing that. About half of our prison population is people in jail for drug-related offenses, drug dealing and stuff like that. Portugal said no more, and that was 20 years ago. And their outcomes based on those new policies was effective. And I was actually thinking, I wonder if the USA will ever catch on to that. And I didn't believe it would happen, but out of the blue, a couple of years ago, the state of Oregon decriminalized all drugs. I'm talking heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, everything. Nobody's going to prison for drugs anymore. They're basically treating, when they catch somebody in possession of drugs, they're using it as a civil penalty and using it for the purpose of drug treatment and stuff like that. And they're saving a lot of money on the prison system. And a jail cell is not a great drug treatment facility. Plus, it costs around national average around $40,000 a year or more to keep somebody in prison. You can get a lot of drug treatment for that particular cost. So anyway, we're on the right track, but we still have a long way to go. And let's I guess from an ethical utilitarianist outcome, I think it's a waste of time to statistically, it's a waste of time to keep throwing money at a problem the same way. Catch drug dealers, catch people who possess drugs, throw them in prison, arrest them, waste police resources, when the more effective methodology, according to the criminologists and my review of the research, is if you get people off drugs, that improves your problem, versus if you arrest a drug dealer, another drug dealer will just step into his place. So, and what's kind of funny about that is when you put so many people in jail for drugs, we actually don't have room to put rapists in jail and child molesters in jail, because as a practitioner, I've arrested a lot of people for drug crimes, violent crimes, rape, sex crimes, and so forth. There's a lot of times that we just there was just not room to put sex offenders who victimize children in jail for as long as the drug offenders, because by statute, the drug offenders had to spend more time in jail, so therefore there was less room, which is kind of, for lack of a better word, insane. So that's my wrap up on chapter 1. We'll see you in chapter 2.